Good day, I'm Shay Burgess, and thanks for joining me on Health and Family. Today we'll be talking about diabetes. We don't like to hear it, but 3 in 4 Bermuda residents are overweight or obese. We have one of the highest percentages of overweight and obese people in the world. Obesity and the lifestyle choices that cause it also lead to the early onset of preventable diseases like diabetes, kidney disease, and heart disease. These conditions bear a terrible burden on those afflicted, on their families, and they are expensive to treat. The Ministry of Health is committed to tackling the scourge of obesity and chronic, non-communicable diseases on our population. Our future prosperity depends on this because sick people can't work or study, and they become an economic burden rather than productive members of society. For this reason, the Throne Speech 2017 highlighted a commitment to health and wellness. Today, I welcome to the studio Sara McKitrick, registered dietitian and diabetes educator for the Bermuda Diabetes Association, who is talking to us about type 1 and type 2 diabetes and how nutrition plays a role in making us healthier and more productive. Welcome, Ms. McKitrick, to our program. So we always like to start off very basic. What is diabetes? I know that's a
basic question. Diabetes is simply having too much sugar in the blood.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
And so which type of diabetes? We mentioned type 1 and type 2. Which one is more prevalent in Bermuda?
The epidemic that we speak about globally and in Bermuda refers to type 2 diabetes, which is far more prevalent in our island.
All right, so talk to us about type 1, because that exists too.
Yeah, type 1 has been documented from very early time. Type 1 diabetes is simply the organ in the body called the pancreas makes a hormone called insulin. Insulin is responsible for transporting the sugar from the food we eat into our cells for energy. In type 1 diabetes, the pancreas no longer makes insulin, and that person has to take insulin for the rest of their life. Okay. The key component with that, there's nothing that person can do to prevent type 1 diabetes. It's an autoimmune destruction of the cells in the body that make insulin, and they'll never repair themselves.
So they were born with it, most likely?
No, they develop it usually when they're younger, usually under the age of 30 or 40, but the most common age of diagnosis for type 1 diabetes is in childhood and pre-adolescence. We probably have less than 25 children under the age of 18 with type 1 diabetes, and overall on the island less than about 150 or 200 people with type 1 diabetes.
Okay, now type 2 is the biggie here on the island.
Type 2 is the one that we talk about in terms of the media with lifestyle and associated, because there is this preventable component to it, reversible component to it. We think documented from statistics in our surveys, 13% of the population affected with diabetes, possibly a higher number if you include those who are at risk of diabetes. In other words, pre-diabetes, haven't been diagnosed yet. And so that could translate into 8,000 to 9,000 Bermudians living on the island with type 2 diabetes.
So that's quite a bit of the population.
This is where we, I think, in the North American and Caribbean region for the International Diabetes Federation are ranked number 2nd for our statistics as the percentage of the global average is 8%. So our average at 13% in Bermuda is higher than the global average for diabetes around the world.
Okay, and so why is it so high?
Well, I think that the two components really in Bermuda. One, genetics. We're a small island, and genetics does play a role in the development of type 2 diabetes. We talk about the fact that people may carry the gene, but the environment obviously can trigger that turning into type 2 diabetes. We have an environment here where we have an abundance of food, high calorie, high carbohydrate, high fat, high density foods, and unfortunately, being Bermudian myself, we are prone to high levels of sedentary inactivity. We'll park wherever we want to park, and we know that the risk factors for causing that trigger for type 2 diabetes to be activated into diabetes are largely caused through lifestyle causes.
Okay. So what would be the similarities in symptoms between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
So it's going back to that symptom, having too much sugar in the blood, when the body's trying to get rid of, when you've developed over time type 2 diabetes, or usually it's more of a short acute onset with type 1 diabetes, but you have too much sugar in the blood. The body tries to get rid of it first and foremost by getting rid of it in your urine. So very cleverly tries to pass urine in your glucose in your urine. Some people may have had a check at the doctor where their urine is tested for sugar. So if you're peeing a lot, you're thirsty. And if your body is not getting that sugar into the cells for energy, you feel tired a lot. So we call those, and the UK Diabetes Campaign, which I quite often talk in schools and workplaces, the 3 T's of going to the toilet a lot, to pass water, to be tired, and to be thirsty. Those are 3 symptoms very common to potentially what could be an issue with having too high blood sugars.
Okay. Is there a difference between men and women in regards to symptoms? Or?
Good question, but no, absolutely the same. So for whatever age, men or women, those are the classic symptoms.
All right. So if I'm doing what you said, the three T's.
Yep. Going to the bathroom a lot, very thirsty, and not sleeping at night because I'm up to the bathroom, or just generally feeling fatigued. Our recommendation is to take yourself to your doctor for it's not something you can check for at home. It does need to be a blood test, and your doctor will usually do a fasting blood sugar test to see overnight fast if your blood sugar levels are higher than they should be. We do a lot of blood sugar screening on the island, which might highlight to an elevated blood sugar that's higher than normal, but we'll want to go and back and diagnose that with your doctor as a diagnosis of an elevated fasting blood sugar test.
And what should they normally be registered at?
So a normal blood sugar should be anything between about 80 and 120 through the day. So if one person doesn't have diabetes, their blood sugars should be maintained in that range during the day. For a fasting blood sugar in a normal range, not diabetes, we want it below 100.
Okay, that's good to know. And why is it so bad for your health? I think people know about diabetes, the sugar, but what does it do to your actual body?
Well, over time, diabetes is quite silent in that you can travel around. People with diabetes can live years and days, and when the blood sugar levels go higher than 120, it's not something we feel. So you can walk around with a blood sugar of 160 or 180, or it can be in the 200s, and we don't feel that silent damage that it's doing. But over time, and over sometimes many decades, not addressing the problem of having your sugars being too high, and having high blood sugars in the small tiny vessels going to our eye and the larger vessels going to our heart and to our organs, they cause complications of diabetes, which can be really quite dramatic and traumatic. And this is where we're looking to prevent people from having diabetes in the first place, to prevent those complications, which can be economic in terms of what it costs to treat and manage them. But for people that do have diabetes, to give them the hope that complications shouldn't happen and don't need to happen. If we take diabetes, control it, try and reverse it, do what we can to manage those numbers within that normal range, those damages won't be done to those small and large vessels. But it's blindness, it's kidney disease and dialysis, of which we have an alarming number of people in Bermuda on dialysis secondary to the complications of diabetes, heart attack and stroke, and loss of limbs. So a lower limb, we have alarming statistics for amputation secondary to vascular disease and neuropathy, diabetic neuropathy. Having a diabetes doubles your chance of a cardiovascular event or a heart attack too. So these are the real implications for people with diabetes, really trying to take control and manage their numbers. The Diabetes Association and Department, we're all here to help people in this day and age get the treatment that they need to manage those numbers where they need to be.
Okay, so how does one go about controlling their sugar on a day-to-day basis?
With diabetes, I mean, I think diabetes should be and can be controlled multifaceted. First and foremost obviously it's more and more important. I've been helping people decades looking at what we eat. Obviously everything that we eat in our body ultimately will affect our blood sugar levels. So for many people, the first aspect of change will be looking at what someone eats and trying to change, make some dietary adjustments. Exercise is hugely important in terms of getting that blood glucose, that sugar, into your muscle cells and burning it up. If we don't burn up that blood sugar and it's stored as fat in and around our organs, that's what can lead to the problem of developing chronic diseases such as diabetes. So if we're active and we do have diabetes and you're out there walking, you're pulling those blood sugars into your muscles and getting them burned up, keeping them in a normal range, helping to keep exercise plays a long road in helping. Medications help also. So obviously if someone first goes to their doctor and their blood sugars are very high, yes, it's quite likely that they'll be started on medications for their blood sugars. Medications, I like to think of it as part of a triangle, that medication isn't going to do it alone to control your diabetes. It's done in conjunction with what we're eating and how we're exercising.
Would you say 30 minutes a day is a good number to start with, at least?
Yeah, excellent. I mean, the guidelines, the sort of recommended guidelines are 150 minutes a week. So that's 5 days a week of 30 minutes of exercise. Mm-hmm. That, I think, and we talk about, I think I'm trying to put a lot more emphasis on physical activity. Don't wait for a time that you have to go to exercise or go to work out. Make any part of your day more physically active. Anytime we're using a muscle, whether you're walking a little bit further in Hamilton, whether you're walking around your office using the stairs, we're using those muscles, we're burning up sugar, and we're preventing that whole trigger of insulin resistance from occurring. So all of it plays a big role.
Okay. We're actually going to be going to a break shortly, but I wanted to talk, when I was doing the research, that you actually were taking people to the grocery shop, yep, and showing them how to actually pick out groceries. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, part of the Diabetes Association's programs we ran a few years ago, and we still do them when Lindo's partners with us and hugely successful. We would run some groups through the grocery store teaching people how to interpret labels and to look at how much sugar, carbohydrate was in a product. And at the end of the tour, I think it's very important to say, if your grocery basket is full of foods that don't actually have a label in them, you've got an apple, an avocado or an egg in there, then you're winning, because it's those real foods which have less added sugar and less fats and are better for you.
I like that. So yeah, if you have less
foods in your basket that don't have an ingredient in it, list on it in the first place, then you're doing well. So real foods.
Good, I like that. That's a simple way of looking at it. Yeah. So can type 2 diabetes be reversed?
And this is the exciting news. I think I've been a registered dietitian for some years now, and I think in the practice of nutrition and medical science, we always have to keep updated and see why haven't things been working generally. Mm-hmm. We've been predominantly for the last 2 or 3 decades on low-fat diets. We've watched the fats, which has led to an increase in our carbohydrate consumption. Mm. If our carbohydrate consumption has gone up because we've had a low-fat bowl of cereal and low-fat milk and a high amount of carbohydrates, if we're not burning those carbohydrates up, we're storing them as fat. Mm. So in these last 2 or 3 decades, we've seen not obesity and diabetes rates drop, but we've seen them increase. And I think there's a growing recognition now in the medical community that we have to focus on carbohydrate intake. And if we focus on carbohydrate intake and if diabetes is a disorder or your body's not using carbohydrates and sugar properly and you've got too much sugar in the blood, if we can reduce the carbohydrate intake, look at how our body's burning up that sugar when we do take it in our diet, there's a good chance for reversing that diabetes through a long process. And it's directly impacted by dietary and exercise lifestyle changes.
All righty. Good info. Well, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, Ms. McKitrick will be here. Also joining her will be Rochester, who actually participated in the reversal of the type 2 diabetes program. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Healthy people in healthy communities.
Let's get a drink before class. I'm gonna get some water. I don't want any sugar sitting in my mouth. Yeah, sugar is a bacteria-causing acid that eats your teeth. True that. I don't want an acid attack in my mouth. I look good, girl, and I want to stay that way. This is a message from the Department of Health.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, our topic today is diabetes, and our guests are Sara McKitrick and Rochester, who actually participated in the reversal of a type 2 diabetes program. We want to welcome you back and, of course, say hi to you, Mr. Rochester.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to start off with you. When were you first diagnosed with diabetes?
Around 17 years ago, somewhere in that vicinity.
Okay. Do you remember your reaction?
Was not happy. I said, person of my stature, of my build, how did I get this disease? You know, for me, it was unbelievable.
Was it in your family or?
Just my grandfather, I think that's about it.
Okay. And so when did you decide to actually enter the type 2 reversal program?
June or July of this year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, and
It's
so,
just been running. We started it in March this
Okay.
year, so it's relatively new. The diabetes reversal program, it runs as 6-week courses, so we're only on probably the 5th or 6th group.
okay. And so do you think it was an easy program to follow?
It was, considering I wasn't one that ate a whole lot of crazy stuff. So therefore, you know, changing my eating habits wasn't that bad at all.
And you used to exercise and all that?
Exercise and all of that.
Would you recommend the program?
Of course I would, and I have been since I've been.
All right. And so talk to us about, say for instance, you're going out, and I want to really paint a picture because a lot of, as Ms. McKitrick said, a lot of people in Bermuda do have this pre or diabetes.
Right.
And so eating is a big portion of our lives. Talk to us about going out to eat. What would you like order on a menu or something else?
Well, my favorite restaurant where I work is Flanagan's.
Okay.
And I basically order a lot of salads.
Okay.
Spinach salad. And what I'd have on that would probably be either chicken or salmon. That's
That's
it.
what you do now?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the foods you gravitate to,
Yes.
the salads and lean meats and...
Indeed.
Okay. And so did you participate in the grocery shopping with Ms. McKitrick?
No, I didn't, but she did bring some items into the actual program and showed us the labels and all of this, the contact, you know, and all
We
of
did
that.
it in class. So we
Yes,
had
yes,
an
we did it in
in-class
class.
session. The key component of this course, the diabetes reversal program, is making the connection, and Mr. Rochester might agree with me, that carbohydrates turn into
Absolutely.
sugar. You've got to understand where the carbohydrates are in the foods we eat. And, you know, people think, well, it's in a beet, it's in some dried cranberries, it's in a bowl of milk, it's in, where are the carbohydrates we eat? Carbohydrates turn into sugar. All that is going to affect my blood sugar levels after I've eaten. So being cognizant of what we're eating is, and the question easy, I don't think many people find it easy. If you're used to eating a healthy, varied diet in the first place, and you're choosing more vegetables and you're eating protein, we're using healthy fats and walnuts and olive oil and avocados. If you're used to eating, but if you've gravitated towards processed foods and a lot of refined white sugary foods, it is a big change because we are looking at those foods that contain carbohydrate that get transferred into sugar in your body and cause the problems that they do in diabetes. So it's that connection, isn't it?
Definitely. So, because I was one that used to eat a whole lot of peas and rice, macaroni
Right,
and cheese,
right.
potatoes, right, and oatmeal, cereal, and not realizing that all of that stuff was just sitting in my body and just
Ingredients
turning it
of
into
our
sugar,
starch.
right?
Yeah.
So now I've cut, when I do eat pasta, I know I have to go and burn it off.
Okay. It always kills me when I go to functions and I'll see like 2 starches on a plate and
4 or 5 sometimes.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
just-
indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed.
And
it's just too much, yeah.
So we're really changing that focus on a lot more vegetables on the plate, understanding that the carbohydrates are there for energy, but if we don't, our body will actually make the carbohydrates, the glucose, sugar we need. We want people to think, a lot of people look at just sugar on the label
Absolutely.
and don't just think it's carbohydrates. So if an item doesn't seem to have much added sugar in it, to your body, a bowl of rice and beans, is going to turn into sugar. The rice itself isn't sweet, but it's going to be, because it's got carbohydrates, it's going to turn into sugar. We teach people to check their blood sugars through the program to make it meaningful, to see if I eat that amount of carbohydrate, what does that do to my blood sugar, so that they learn their own limits and how to cut back their own carbohydrate intake, because it's carbohydrates is the bigger word probably than sugar, in terms of that carbohydrate will turn into sugar in my body regardless of where it's come from. If it's come from a bowl of sweetened cereal, or if it's come from a piece of fruit. So we learn those fruits that affect blood sugars more than others. And it's a very long and very comprehensive course. And I think the difficulty is for people that have come through the program take it in on board, and then we go out into a community or an environment where, very grateful that the program like this has been done today, where we recognize in Bermuda there's a lot of carbohydrates in the environment.
Yes,
There's and so we've got this environment that doesn't support really, and we've got a lot of small changes to make in our lifestyle every day with big results.
Absolutely.
You mentioned fruit, and a lot of people, fruit for the most part is healthy, but it can also affect.
All fruit contains fruit sugar, fructose.
Okay.
Yep.
So what would be an ideal fruit to eat?
Well, we teach a concept that there are some fruits, like tropical fruits, which turn into sugar faster in the body.
Papaya stuff.
Watermelon and bananas and pineapple, mangoes people like. So the fruits which we say have a higher fiber content, berries, apples, tend to be, and one doesn't tend to overeat an apple. You eat an apple and you've finished with it. You don't tend, like a bag of grapes, to eat the whole bag of grapes. So an apple, some berries.
Which is very
and berries aren't sweet too, so people will have a handful of berries and eat that. And so berries and apples are probably top of our list, but we have time in the course to explain the concepts and the reasons behind the advice that we're giving.
Okay. So Andre, as far as, and let's be honest, is there a food you miss? Let's be honest.
I miss the pasta and the rice and that, but I know, knowing that when I eat it and eating portion size,
Okay.
maybe like in a cup, I know I have to go and exercise. Like a day would have been today, I would have gone out and run 12, 13 miles.
Wow.
Knowing I have to, if I ate that particular starch, But last night I did exercise, I ate a little bit of rice, but then I know I worked that off last night.
As soon as you eat some type of carbohydrate, you've got to work
I've
on.
got to work it off, of course.
No, the reason I asked is that our audience are watching, and so I wanted to make the assimilation between, okay, I really liked pasta. Is there a substitute I can use for that, or you just saying just substitute the exercise? You can eat it, but make sure you work it off.
And we would tell people to have a bed of vegetables on your plate. So if you've made a meal and you've got your chicken or you've got your fish or you've got your meat and a sauce, you're putting that over a bed of perhaps shredded vegetables, cabbage, cauliflower, instead of what would have predominantly been a bed of rice or a bed of pasta or potato. I like that Andre used the word portion size. We all know as in registered dietitian, we're talking not just is any one food to blame, but it's the portions we've eaten of them. So we're generally taking in much more carbohydrate than our body needs, and Andre made the connection there. If I do take carbohydrates, that's going to be on one of my exercise days. So he plans his week where you do exercise and on those exercise days, he knows he'll have some pasta or some rice because he's going to be active that day.
And so basically you're telling us to plan our meals and plan our...
So, because if you eating pasta and potatoes and rice and all those type of things, you have to burn that off. And it's something that you have to mentally put into your brain that if you're going to eat, and especially portion size, as Dr. McKitrick said, it's all about knowing. You don't have to run. You can walk for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Just a 15-minute walk. Your blood sugar, and if you're a diabetic, your blood sugar would lower you take your blood sugar before you walk and take it after, you see a big difference. You will definitely see a big difference.
You take your sugars
Every day.
Every day, okay.
I try to take it every day as much as I could.
And your exercise of choice is running?
I do cycling as well, so therefore I have a choice of doing both, and then I do exercise class twice a week. So.
Oh, wow. So you're set.
Physical activity, we have an expression that we talk about. In fact, we can't outrun your fork. So, what we eat is really important as well as exercise. We've talked this for decades. We've talked about the importance, but I think now that to give people hope in terms of making that connection between the foods we eat, the exercise we do, you're burning off that glucose. It's not there available to be stored as fat and cause inflammation and chronic disease. We're looking at actually reversing it by burning some of that stored fat. And I think that the conversations are there now, and and it requires a lot of support, doesn't it? Because I think the learning should never stop. We're continuing to what you learn, and every time you go into the grocery store, you're probably looking at something else and thinking, where does this fit in? But it's all big rewards. We know it's working well when you see those blood sugar numbers coming down. So there are a lot of people perhaps watching who check their blood sugars, and I would always say to someone who's checking your blood sugars at home, make that number meaningful. Don't just check it at perhaps one time of day for the 3 months, we ask people to actually check 2 hours after they eat. See what happens when you eat a meal. How high does it go up? Take that number to your doctor or your GP and say, this is what my numbers do after I eat. Perhaps if you tried something the next day and you ate less than that, does my number come down? Make those numbers work for you so that you've got a valuable interpretation of, am I managing well with my diabetes? Am I keeping my numbers within the realm that they should be? So we're teaching people how to make decisions on their own based on the blood sugar numbers that they're getting.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, Sarah, why is it that some ethnic groups are more prone to type 2 diabetes as opposed to others?
I think it goes to the fact that our bodies were designed to be used. And so you look at, unfortunately, around the world, whether we're looking at Pima Indian populations in South America and in ethnic populations in the Aborigines, we do in the same in Black populations, where those muscles, where people in active farming communities, they're used to working the land, and then you stop and the activity ceases and you adopt a Western diet and lifestyle. A lot of countries around the world that didn't have type 2 diabetes as a problem now have, because they're not as active as we are, and we're seeing an influence in Western diets. So we've got to keep moving our bodies as they've designed to be used, and giving our bodies the appropriate amount of foods that were designed and we can metabolize and break down.
Okay, there was a question I wanted to ask in the first half of the program to you about children and type 2 diabetes. What can we do to offset that? I mean, I know it's...
Well, we are seeing an influence. That's right. A couple of decades ago, we wouldn't have said that type 2 diabetes was something we considered that we would get as one got older. Type 2 diabetes is occurring in people younger and younger, teens and young adults. It's not just a disease that we're getting people when they're older. And it's more activity, it's drinking water, it's making those lifestyle changes that we're able to get out, and the importance of that, where we know that type 2 diabetes has a strong genetic component. So if we have grandparents or parents with type 2 diabetes and you think your child might be at risk, this is where the importance of activity and exercise, drinking water, plays a role in delaying or postponing the development of type 2 diabetes at any age.
Yeah.
Just to add, it's just not food that adds the weight on or the diabetes. It's all about alcohol as well. So you have to kind of cut that out or minimize that to a level where you're not drinking as much. For example, 2 glasses of wine a day will work for you instead of a whole bottle. Yeah. So therefore,
the same philosophy.
I've lost, since June, I've lost like 20 pounds.
Okay, wow.
Not that I was a big guy, but I did lose 20 pounds, and I'm really proud of that.
And his blood sugar numbers are excellent.
Come down, yes. My AB1C has come down, so
Fantastic.
Thankful.
Unfortunately, our time is up. I want to thank you both for really sharing some vital information with our audiences. On behalf of the Health and Family, we would like to thank both our guests for being so enlightening about diabetes. So we now know that type 2 diabetes can be reversed by just adjusting our food intake, our exercise breaks, and most of all, our attitude. We have seen and heard that it can be done. So let's do what we have to do to maintain our bodies to its optimum best. At the end of the day, it's our own bodies we're talking about here. A big thanks once again to Ms. McKitrick and to Andre Rochester for talking to us about this disease. I'm Shay Burgess. Thanks for tuning in.